you.
Thank you.
Well, thanks very much for the intro. And I just wanted to share a sprightly 26-slide presentation after lunch. I'm taking you on London's journey, not London sports. We're going to dwell a little bit about what London sports' role is in the whole thing, but what we're trying to do in London as a city. First of all, we're going to talk about London's aims, what we are trying to achieve over the next few years. Then look a little bit about the strengths and challenges within London, and ultimately what the solutions are, what London sports' role is in it, and a little bit about how we're getting on. So first of all, London's aims. We launched the Blueprint for London about 2 years ago. And as I say, this is a blueprint for London. This is about trying to give direction to everybody who does anything to get people active within London. We launched 2 years ago. Here's a few photos. One of me clearly photobombing the launch. I'm not photoshopped on. I was there. But to distill all that down, we have put in place an exceptionally bold statement to make London the most active city in the world. It's a very easy thing to say, but to get that across, what we're trying to say is it's about far more than sport. This isn't because of the government agenda, but it's because it's the right thing to do. We also want London to be the very, very best in the world, bar none, the most active nation. It's already celebrated as one of, if not the best cities in the world, but why not the most active? Because that will support everything. And most importantly, what I want to try to get across throughout this, we're not talking about doing the same stuff again and again and again. We want a revolution. Do things properly, differently, so nothing is off the table. And depressingly, this target of getting 1 million people more active by 2020 won't even get us there. That's only the first thing in the first few years. Because when you actually look at the stats, far too small to see potentially, but when you just look at Europe, we're only 9th. That's pitching London against countries. And we're a long, long way behind some of the Scandinavian nations. So it's a huge challenge, absolutely massive, which reinforces the point we need to do things differently, not just a few more programs, not just a few more facilities. It needs a societal shift. I thought rather than me saying too much, let's get someone else to do it. So let's watch a quick video.
A river runs through it. The scrapers, they point to the sky as a limit, break through it. And we endorse none but ourselves when we're saying just do it. I'll prove it.
We're bringing the culture, the spirit, the future, the city we live in. From millionaires down to the ones with the humble beginnings. We're winning and moving.
We're constantly growing and moving and showing and proving. Despite all the traffic delaying, we know what we're doing. No losing. Inviting the drivers to bring on a gridlock, cause brethren, you're biking. The light go from amber to green and you're already flying. Call it free cycling. Stay active. Just one of the talents that really don't need any practice. Get out of bed with a hop, skip and jump from the mattress. The city is waiting outside and the ride of your life could be right round the corner. Happiness waiting there for you. Stop at the Roses and leisurely have a sniff. Run the river from Tower to Hammersmith.
We've gone from a dirty old town to one of the best in the world. Go get your trainers or skates and watch 8.5 million stories unfurl.
Let's get 1 million of you on your feet by the time we reach 2020. And if this gets one of you on your feet now, then for now, to me, that's more than plenty. Maybe you'll tell a friend to go tell a friend that we're taking the streets. This is LDN, the global setter of trends, the one most diverse in the ends. where the talk of the town is quite sonic and the whole skyline is iconic. Back in 2012, we laid a blueprint. You can take yourself as far as you think. Take 100%, never take zero. You could go from unsung to a straight hero.
From grassroots, we form like troops, true warriors. Happier, healthier, more prosperous. Get the blood pumping like the Thames through London. Let's activate, show the world where we come from.
I know what you're thinking. I am pretty street, it's fair to say. Yeah, I was the middle-aged man on the fold-up bike in the middle of that, which is really embarrassing. So moving on swiftly. So London's strengths and weaknesses, or challenges rather. It's fair to say London has some real massive benefits when it comes to this kind of challenge. It is a relatively small area. I mean, I certainly take this challenge over Cornwall, which has quite the opposite challenge. Relatively pretty good on green space. Public transport's fantastic. But equally, there are lots of challenges here as well. They are challenges, not necessarily weaknesses. And ultimately, the challenge for London is to make light of those challenges and make sure we make benefit from the strengths, which is simple to say. But I wanted to dwell on a few of those challenges because they're particularly pertinent in terms of what we have to overcome. Changing demographics. A couple of slides here. London's going to change a lot in our lifetimes. For example, by 2040, it'll be an ethnic majority. These projections, in spite of Brexit and everything else, are still holding true. And similarly nationally as well, it's a very complicated graph to say something quite simple, that as a percentage of population, those children and adults are going to decline and older people are going to increase. So we're going to have 1 million more over 50s by 2040. And you think, yeah, these are two things that we probably know already anecdotally, but the challenge is we're not just trying to make today's London the most active. We've got to react to what future challenges are. And they're two areas where I think physical activity is quite weak. We don't cater for some ethnic minorities and some age groups particularly well. So we've got to prepare for the future. And there's one thing on here that isn't true in terms of the weaknesses. Anyone know which one it is? A time-poor population. There's a perception out there that today's society is more time-poor. We don't have time for sport and leisure. Absolutely not true. Since the 1970s, we've had more free time available to us to do stuff other than our day-to-day jobs than we ever have done. But the thing is, the leisure market has changed. And this is what I want to go through. This is a Deloitte study from last year. And I want to just, if you like, have a brief description of the leisure market to show how it's changed. The growth of leisure has been twice that of retail, surprisingly, over the last 5 years. So it's a growing thing. But our bit of it hasn't changed. This is a very complicated graph that I'm going to whip through. But it's the higher up on the graph, the more it costs. The more to the left, the less frequently we do it. So for example, travel, holidays, high cost, only do it about once a year. Similarly, live sporting events, more the cultural stuff, and sort of 10-pin bowling. Eating out, drinking out, for me that is an annual event, so I blame the kids for that. But again, it's all competing for leisure time, as is takeaway food. And there's us, pretty frequent, not massive cost, but as I'll come on to in a minute, that hasn't changed too much. But what has happened is the leisure market has grown, but not in traditional areas. These things such as video games, video streaming, and ultimately online services is where the growth has happened. The rest of it is stagnated to some extent. So it is just having this thought that, okay, the world's changed a lot in the last 20 years. How is sport and physical activity? We've got Strava, some wearable tech. Ultimately, it hasn't changed. It's still incredibly difficult to book online. You look how travel's changed in that time, how you can book a hotel probably within 30 seconds with full price comparison. It's quite embarrassing, to be frank. Our part of the world has got to catch up, or otherwise, other bits of leisure, the bit we're really competing with, will flourish instead of us. Which comes on to the solutions. this is the way I think the consumer, those people at the top, looks at sport. All of us, all the different providers, are all competing against each other for attention. In fact, this really came to a head when I was at a consultation meeting recently with some big NGBs, and we were asking about who their competitors are, and they pointed at each other, which is a ridiculous thing to say. It's not. The real competitors are the people who are competing for leisure time, competing for attention. What we really need to do figuratively is do what the arts do very well. Collective bargaining. It's us against them. It's us against shopping. Why aren't we working together properly to market and promote what we do as opposed to them? Then what happens? Don't worry about market share. The market's bigger. Ultimately, we'll all benefit from it. It's the whole a rising tide raises all boats sort of mentality. It's very easy to do in a PowerPoint. Well, actually, it's not. It took me a few hours, that. But it's it's very easy to talk about in a PowerPoint. Moving on about my use of time at work. But in terms of you and London Sport, this is what we're here to do. We've got a really good position. You know, we've got 55 staff, £5-6 million a year, which is great. But how do you use that resource to talk about the changes, the real sector changes, the real population changes that we're talking about? And for me, it's two things. It's collaboration, which is a buzzword, but I mean proper collaboration. Not encouraging people to sign MOUs, actually executing them, actually working in partnership. And bizarrely, talking to a lot of the private sector, even in banking, there's more collaboration there than there is in some public sector sport. It's a real food for thought. And the other one is kind of innovation, another buzzword, but I really don't like innovation, so I don't think it's a case of innovating. It's about creativity. We don't have to do things particularly different. We just have to look at what other sectors have done and do it in our world. That travel booking example is one thing. You know, we can recreate that. It's not about innovating, it's just about ripping off that idea and doing it in our world. So on to London Sport's role. In simple terms, the number of people who provide physical activity in sport is really complicated. There are loads of them, all with, this is just figurative, strong relationships in some areas. Some people don't talk to each other. The job of London Sport is to be that central go-to point that everyone works with. That's not to say we solve everything, far from it, but we can certainly say, oh, you want to do that? Go and talk to them. To make the whole thing work better together. But also make it bigger. Bring in other industries, whatever it is. These are just three particular ones we're focused on. To make sure the sector works well together and properly collaborates where it's worthwhile. So how are we getting on? I just want to draw through a few examples of what we've done to try and reinforce that collaboration and creativity. So in terms of collaboration, over the last 2 years, we've worked with a mind-boggling number of organisations, over 3,000 organisations, to different degrees, but in all cases, working out what they need and what support they need. That might be advice on marketing, governance, or a thing, funding from us, from other people, or just leadership. Advice on how to strategize and what they should and shouldn't be doing. We've also run various partner events, 5 conferences and 15 smaller boutique events, which is a lovely word for small. It sounds far more fashionable. But ultimately, it's all about bringing people together, sharing ideas and creating those relationships. We've also about to open something that I'm very excited about, which is the House of Sport. It's an office block, ultimately, that's going to bring together a lot of community sport. It opens in July, subject to builders actually pulling their finger out. It's 150 desks plus a cafe, shared space. And we really hope it will be the centre for community sport in London. As I say, it will be a centre of mass, hopefully. It's going to host 10 organisations, all in our space, but very diverse. And what we're trying to create is that water cooler moment. It's not necessarily going there for a meeting. It'll be the 2 or 3 accidental meetings you have while you're there. But it's a focal point where we can run events and really get the sector working together within London. We're also running a marketing campaign, ultimately, for sport and physical activity, London Moves Me. This is about a social media campaign where everyday normal people post what they're doing. I say normal people, one of them's born. He's not necessarily normal in any way. But certainly we had real traction. 8,000 posts, all celebrating what people are doing in everyday life. And their overall reach is over 1.5 million, and that's only the first phase of it. The next phase is to work with partner organisations to say, great, what are you going to do for the blueprint? What are you going to commit to make London the most physically active place in the world? Creativity, just reinforcing the point about innovation. The House of Sport will also host a technology business incubator, the UK's first physical space for technology startups to come and work together. Really quite exciting, because we realise technology is clearly the future. It's something we all need to embrace, but the worst thing we can do is do it ourselves. There are loads of great startups out there that we want to host and bring into our world. We're also involved in the open data movement, which I've talked about earlier, about making the whole thing bookable. We created the first ever public sector funded innovation fund to invest directly in start-up private businesses. We're using big data techniques, something that 10 years ago the commercial world's already done. It's the first time that public sector really started embracing open data, and also created a new product, if you like, for a new market in sitting netball. So ultimately, how are we getting on? It's all well and good. We've got a 1 million target. This is the trend we're looking for from 2014 up to 2020. How are we getting on? Pretty well. In 2 years, 216,000 people more active. Not for a moment suggesting that's us. It's not. It's London. But I really think the stuff we've started to do, the stuff we started to instigate, is really starting to make a difference. We've also saved £500,000 a year in terms of how we operate, and about the same for the sector already, and that's before a lot of the implementation has kicked in. I'm almost there. But something I wanted to just really reinforce, embedded in all the new strategy in national government, is around behaviour change. It's absolutely crucial. But I think the most crucial behaviours to change are our own, are our organisations, to properly collaborate and properly commit together to changing the sector, and not just doing more stuff that we've always done and compete against each other. So in summary, we're looking to get 1 million people more active and change 1 million lives. It's a big, big challenge. And we're doing this by modernising the sector and getting people to work together properly. And it's still early days, but I think it's fair to say we're getting there. Thanks for listening.